Well, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be joined by Amantha King, who is a dear friend and a very, very highly qualified individual, about which I will say lots more in a few moments. I'm Shanaz, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with all of you because we'd like to throw a bit of a spotlight on perhaps our shared experiences as women with South Asian backgrounds and our journey through our interesting health milestones. We're of a similar age and we are experiencing things sometimes in the same way and sometimes slightly differently. So I'm going to be asking Amantha a few questions, but just to give you a little bit of background from her LinkedIn profile, but also because I've been an avid viewer of Amantha's YouTube channel. Amantha King Coaching is amazing for getting right to the heart of some of these quite tricky issues. I think, Amantha, you're so straight talking. You've got this scientific curiosity that kind of makes us interested in the subject, but also it makes it quite accessible because you use language that is quite open and easy to hold on to. So I love the fact that you've got all of these strings to your bow and that you're out there educating, sharing and championing the kind of women's health issues that we're each facing. With that, and I could go on, I'd like to get you to introduce yourself. And Amantha, share a little bit of your story currently. Where are you with your health and well-being?
Oh, thank you, Shanaz. It's so lovely to be here. And yes, great things come out of great friendship. So thank you for having me as your guest. So my name is Amantha King. I'm a strengths performance coach and I'm a menopause coach. So how do those two things line up together? Because, strength is quite a masculinated word, and everything that we're seeing in the current media about menopause, it's a mixed bag really. So why am I in this space? I'm in this space because fate brought me here. Something higher than myself had it in mind for me to be this person, to be this advocate for women, and it came about because of my own menopause transition, which I'm still going through. So to answer your question, I'm now 50, so I'm in that happy VIP club, and it is happy and joyous, but it wasn't always that way because as someone pointed out to me, I first started my perimenopause journey when I had a 2-year-old toddler. I was 36. Some people call a mum of 34 geriatric, which I find hugely negative. That in itself sort of puts us in a place that we don't need to be. I don't consider myself an old mum or a young mum. I just considered myself to be a mum, and I love that role. But sort of 2 years after having my daughter, I became very aware. I'd almost morphed into a teenager. I had acne back, which I'd had suffered with during my teenage years. I had it here on my chin, on my neck. I had it on my lower back. And so I instantly knew, hang on a minute, we're going back round to where we were sort of in the teenage years when I was at secondary school, when we were at school, Shanaz. And so I thought, right, okay, not really happy with that. I sort of felt that I'd sort of lost myself. And this is the first thing that I wanted to say, which is that menopause and the menopause transition is a biological, psychological, social experience. It is not a disease. It's not a condition. It's an experience, and everyone's experience is different. And so my experience trundled on for the last 14 years. So I've been perimenopausal for 14 years. And I don't say that to shock. I say it to anyone who's watching to go into this stage with an open mind, because everyone's experience is unique to them, like their fingerprint. So mine is 14 years. It hasn't always been as tricky, but to start off with it really, really was. And so I would sort of present with any number of symptoms. I mean, there are upward of 45 symptoms now for perimenopause. When I'm talking to individuals and businesses, I talk about connecting the dots, a bit like a dot to dot. You sort of get partway through it and then you realize what it is. And that's what perimenopause is like. And so it's that first stage where our hormones are going wobbly. And for me, I really did suffer not a word I use very often in my day-to-day job, but I really did suffer. My relationships suffered, my mental health suffered. I became a real shadow of my former self. I'm quite a gregarious, outgoing person. I really love to have fun, and I became anything but that. And I just remembered my mum saying to me one day, "I haven't seen you smile in a very long time." And I think that's the really saddest part of it, is that you know, in the media frenzy we're in at the moment, you know, people are talking about HRT, talking about, have we over medicalized menopause? Not in my opinion. We haven't done anywhere near enough talking about it to have it medicalized, if only. But this was the point. I went to my GP. I was really dismissed, and I've talked so many times, but I'll say it here again, not for dramatic effect, but because this was the reality. I had got other symptoms that I hadn't connected with hormones, and those symptoms for me were allergies. I had a lot of sinus infections, postnasal drip, acid reflux.
Wow.
Now, I'm sure most people wouldn't say that's directly attributed to your perimenopause, and yet it was. And I was written off pretty much as worried well. That term appeared on my notes. And I happened to see a locum one day. He was trying to explain something to me, and I could just see out of the corner of my eye on his screen that it said this worried well. And having worked in the pharmaceutical industry most of my professional career, I knew that that wasn't a medical term. And I was told I was stressed. I was told, did I need a holiday? Well, yeah, you would do with a 2-year-old, wouldn't you? And all of these sorts of things. So I was really mismanaged. And still today, my doctor's surgery has no one there that considers themselves interested in menopause. So it's disgraceful. 14 years later, nothing's changed. But what did change for me is, because I am quite resourceful, because I am scientifically curious, as you describe, and I'm a self-learner, I just thought, I'm going to fix myself. Because I did feel broken, largely. And so I took myself off to a sexual health clinic. Why did I go there? Because I figured that's the only place where they're going to be interested in fertility. And I knew hormones are about fertility. So I went to my local sexual health clinic, and they were amazing. They did tests on me. I know blood tests have come under question, but at that time they were doing blood tests. They did blood tests on me, and a doctor phoned me when I was on holiday, and she said, "Amantha, you need to come in as a matter of urgency. I'm very concerned you don't have any estrogen. You won't be laying down new bone. I'm worried for your heart health because you are young. Come in and see me." And that was the beginning of that turning point, Jaynaz, and it made me really passionate that I didn't want anyone else to suffer in the way that I had suffered. And so I made it my business to always be talking about it. And so I've not been newly talking about menopause. I've been talking about it the whole time I've been experiencing it, but I just didn't go public with it until 2 years ago. So that's where I'm at. I'm an advocate for every woman. I don't pay any attention to what the color is of your skin, what your faith is, what age you are. A menopause is a natural cycle that every single woman on the planet will experience, and therefore that's why I'm here talking about it.
Gosh, what a journey. And for 14 years, as you say, to have had the experience that was both, in a sense, completely unsupported in that sense, very understudied, and for us to then be able to speak to one another about this, again, I find it difficult when you're not in control, or you're not in the know about certain things you're experiencing. I'm also wondering and kind of casting my mind back to some of the experiences I might have had, and thinking maybe those dots, as you say, that I've yet to connect could have shone a light at that time and helped me in a way that meant I didn't have to experience things in quite such a horrible way as I would have done. So I mean, we'll never know because we've traveled that path now. So I would like to ask a little bit about some of the kind of myths surrounding the perimenopause and the menopause, and in particular, I guess, within our communities that are minority communities, Black and Asian heritage. So are there any particular myths that we should be trying to bust around the perimenopause from your perspective?
Yes, loads. But for the purposes of today, I've picked two really stellar ones. the first thing that we need to know is, in terms of clinical research, women are rarely studied. Most clinical trials are done on men. So we have a patriarchal system around research, which is not okay. But what I can tell you is, I have Sri Lankan heritage. My mum's Sri Lankan, my father's Irish. So I feel I have the capacity to sort of share this in a way that is critical. I'm very happy to be the critical voice of what we don't have enough of. And what I would say to you is, the media gets into a bit of a frenzy about numbers, statistics, all of these sorts of things, but very few of them are actually attributed to our cultures, our ethnicity. You'll see bandied around that the average age for menopause is 51. It is if you're white. That's not true if you're Asian. If you're Asian or of South Asian heritage, you're more likely to have your menopause at 45. So that's 5 years before our white counterparts. Now, if we consider, sorry, I've got a little itchy nose here. If we consider, that's an allergy, which I can come on and talk to you about in a minute. But when we consider that you can have a 14-year journey with perimenopause, like I did,
yes,
it's like we're starting much earlier. So if you're going to hit your menopause at 45 as someone with Asian, Black, as you say, minority heritage, then the reality is your symptoms are going to start a lot earlier. So it might not be very long after having had children, or in your 30s if you haven't had children, that you might start to present with these things. In my case, I had burning gums and burning mouth syndrome. So I was at the dentist for that, not thinking that, as you were saying, Shane, I think there's anything to do with it. So we need our research to get up to date. And we're starting to see that. I have a colleague who is at King's College in London, and we're going to be doing a YouTube video together, and he's going to talk more about Asian experiences of menopause. So there are big question marks, big gaps. So that's the first myth I would like to bust. The second thing that I would like to bust is menopause is not just hot flushes. And honestly, I get really bit grumpy when I hear any news article, oh, it's hot flushes, it's night sweats and brain fog.
Yeah.
That is oversimplifying massively what it is. That's a bit like saying diabetes is just about sugar. It's not. It's so much more than that. And when I come back to this whole biological, psychological, social experience, for me, the thing that is very under talked about is the psychological impact. The psychological impact, which means 1 million women have stepped away from work. You know, the fact that, as I said, I lost sight of myself. Thankfully, I was clinging on by my fingertips, and I do feel I got a lifeline, you know, and then managed to set up 2 businesses during that time. So I want to bust some myths around, actually. A menopause is not just a series of symptoms that will come and then go. People who've got children may appreciate this, or if you're running a business, the goalposts are constantly moving. And that's how I would describe menopause. The goalposts are constantly moving, and it requires you to move with it.
Yes, this is so powerful. Yeah, this is so powerful, because I think, like myself, you are very keen for this to be an experience that is lived through well. And so we want to be able to navigate through that with as much information, which is why your voice is so powerful and the connections you then bring. We want to navigate through it through knowledge, which, as you've just shared, is sorely missing for either communities from our heritage, or because it is the study of the male brain. And I know the book that many of us have got on our shelves or on our audio is the XX brain. Like, fill the gaps with the knowledge so that we get some sense around what it is that the female brain is doing throughout the course of our lives, not just at these sort of big junctures, but what is the female brain kind of looking like. So having that knowledge is so important. Being clear on the symptoms, as you say, it's not 3, I think you mentioned earlier, 45 different symptoms that we could look at. And so you have mentioned a couple of times things like allergies, and I've watched, I think you've talked about histamine in the past. It would be good to get a bit of a sense from that, because I think that can link us now then to kind of tips for wellness and navigating through this experience. So tell us a little bit about what you've discovered and how you're managing your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So this next piece of information, I think, my hope is it blows up into the media, because I think it would just explain so much. There is a correlation between midlife and allergy experience in women. Just ask your girlfriends, ask your communities. Have you developed hay fever recently? Have you noticed you can't eat certain foods? For me, I very quickly couldn't eat strawberries. I took ibuprofen one day for a headache and my throat started swelling up. I also couldn't take aspirin. I went for dental work and I had an abscess. Couldn't take that again. Exactly the same reaction as the ibuprofen. I was like, hang on a minute, I started to become allergic to quite a few things. And what we know is this, and this is where is another partial myth bust, which is that as we decline in our hormones, the first one to decline is actually progesterone, the progestation hormone. And gestation is all about pregnancy, pro-life. That's the one that goes wobbly first. Now, that is a natural antihistamine. Progesterone is a natural antihistamine. So already, when that's going declining, it means you're more vulnerable to allergens, which cause histamine release. Now, here's the thing. Once that starts to happen, unless you take control of it quite quickly, your body goes into what we call estrogen dominance, and you don't want that. Estrogen dominance is what was presenting as the acne on me. And we know in Asian cultures, estrogen dominance is much more profound. Okay, so the reality is, if your histamine starts rising, not only does it give you more allergies, but it also raises your estrogen levels. And so we go into something called estrogen dominance, which can make us very irritable. It can make us feel very sick a lot of the time. We can really feel quite down, quite lethargic. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that's how you feel when you've got an allergy. But actually, one is driving the other. And what I say to clients when I'm speaking to them is, actually, if you've noticed that some foods upset your tummy, you get a runny nose, you get flushing across your cheeks, this is telling you, your body is telling you something. And so this is, again, a really big red flag as far as I'm concerned, which is your hormones are in disruption.
Yes.
So understanding how your body is working is really, really important. The other things I would say then is, so if we have an awareness of what our body is telling us and how our mind is interpreting that, that's really useful. So keep journals. That would be the thing that I would say. I would also say understand things like glucose regulation. We know in Asian cultures, we do struggle with our insulin regulation, and insulin is what helps us get sugar from our bloodstream into our cells. But again, when our estrogen levels start to fluctuate, our insulin sensitivity goes down. So we're constantly eating, but we're not eating very much. And what we are eating is getting stored as fat around our middle. And that's really, really very apparent in Asian cultures. I always remember my mum, I mean, you know, and aunties, you know, the bigger your tummy, the better life is. But the reality is it's not good for us, because that's increasing our cardiovascular risk. So it sort of leads me on then to what I call the 5 pillars of health, which I really advocate. I have feet in both camps. I could not function without HRT. And what I want to also say is, if you have prematurely got declining hormones, and by prematurely, I mean like I was at 36, you are not going to lay down enough bone to keep you going in your 70s and 80s. It doesn't matter how much soya or other things that you try to supplement with, you just will not lay down new bone. And so that is a partial myth. Some people say to me a lot of the time, can't I just eat my way through menopause? It isn't that easy. For some people, they're okay. But I think it's worth having the conversation and getting checked out, especially if you're experiencing these symptoms in your 30s. But the pillars of health I would come back to are, number 1, and this is in the order that I believe them to be important. Number 1, stress. When we're stressed, we don't make sex hormones. Now, we can make our own testosterone. And here's the very clever thing. Testosterone gets converted to estrogen. And Mother Nature's had a bit of a laugh in the male domain, because guess what drives the brain activity in men? Estrogen. It's not testosterone.
Yes.
So testosterone is our friend, and we can make testosterone by walking.
Yes.
But we can't make as much of it if we're stressed out, if we're tired and wired. So for me, stress, controlling your stress through relaxation techniques, meditation, mindful breathing, just all of those sorts of things is so powerful, because that gives your body the natural chance to recoup its ability to furnish you with what you need.
Yeah.
And that's where testosterone comes in. Stress will literally switch off, because think of it, in olden times, you can't be running away from a saber-toothed tiger at the same time thinking about making a baby.
Yeah.
Just generally doesn't work. So that would be the first thing. So relaxation. So rather than saying stress, let's say relaxation, learning how to relax. And there's something here in our bodies called our vagus nerve, which exists here. It exists. It's called your 10th pair of cranial nerves. And actually, when we breathe, that stimulates the vagus nerve. And vagus nerve travels through every organ to your body. So reflexology, as I say, meditation, these are all great ways to reconnect yourself with your vagus nerve. Okay. The second thing I would say is sleep. Sleep, which is a natural follow on from relaxation. Sleep is so important, because when we sleep, we detoxify. Now, if you are someone who has estrogen dominance, we don't want too much estrogen floating around your body. That's not great. We do too much recycling of old estrogen, and that's what can cause problems. So cancers and various things like that. So nutrition and sleep go hand in hand. But why is sleep important? When we're sleeping, we're allowing our body to detoxify. So getting things like cortisol out of our body. And cortisol is our stress hormone. It takes 72 hours for cortisol to leave your body. It's just phenomenal. Wow. So late to school, traffic jams, stress at work, not feeling great. These all contribute to your stress vessel. But sleep is a great way of just allowing the brain to make sense of all of that, recharging, resetting the system. Then we come on to the other two pillars, which I call nutrition and nutrition and exercise. My last one's going to be positivity, but nutrition and exercise. Nutrition is really important. You know, I would say green. What do I mean by that? Get as much green vegetables in your diet as possible. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. These are brilliant for taking out old estrogen out of our body, through the liver, through the digestive system, and out. It's a cleansing mechanism. And so again, that's really helpful to us. Remember I talked about insulin sensitivity. We don't process sugar very well. So actually become a friend to your body, give your body more protein. Focus more on protein. Protein is harder to digest, and so we stay fuller for longer. Plus, if we're lifting weights and stuff with our exercise, that builds muscle. So the protein that we're eating goes to make more muscle. So we're really efficient in terms of what we're eating. Therefore, it's not going on around our tummies, and that's not increasing our cardiovascular risk. And lastly, but really for me, it's the first thing that is one of the biggest symptoms to pop out in a consultation with women, positivity. What we ruminate on inside of our head is actually what we become. So if we are feeling down, depressed, dark thoughts, those manifest, you know. And if you've ever wondered what a thought is, I was only on a call with a client this morning talking about what are thoughts. Neuroscientists can't actually tell you what a thought is. But in the work I do, we know that thoughts are emotions plus feelings equal thoughts. So check in with your emotion of how you're feeling about your menopause transition. If you haven't started yet, how are you feeling about the prospect of it? A bit like labour as well, when you're giving birth, it's statistically shown that if you have another woman there with you who is positive, you're much more likely to have a positive birth. So we know by being positive, You know, menopause can really pull the rug out from under you. It's at a time when children are leaving home or going through exams, like my daughter is at the moment with her GCSEs. You know, it's a time where our elderly parents need more of us. It's a time probably when we're fighting for the next promotion at work, or we're maybe thinking about what else do I want to do with my life. This menopause situation comes and it can just literally floor you. But if we go into it feeling positive, fully aware of the strength and power that lives and resides within you, you're much more likely to have a positive experience. So do the work is what I'm saying. Do the work. Have a good old clear out whilst you're going through your menopause.
Fantastic. I feel like we've had not only a masterclass on the things to think about and the pillars to uphold throughout this experience, but that we've learned a little bit more about your journey and understood how, if you're curious, if you take control, if you advocate for yourself even, which is some of what you did, highly kind of persevering and knowing, because you're the expert in yourself. And so if you know things aren't lining up and things are different to how they've been or not how you wish them to be, then it is incumbent on each of us as individuals to go find that thing that's going to help us to navigate through this experience, and to link arms with those around us who are perhaps walking that path or have gone a few steps ahead, which is, I think, why it's so important that you've reflected on your journey and you've pulled out some of those nuggets of information. So, as you said, people don't have to suffer because no one's talking about it. And I really, really appreciate, Amantha, your commitment to bringing this out so that people can learn and take control of their own experience. That's what it boils down to, I feel. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. And we are really, really grateful that you've spent these moments with us. And for anyone who wants to get in touch with Amantha, you can find all her details if you just check out LinkedIn. And I love watching you on YouTube, and I tune in to get my big old dose of sensible guidance with humor and also with the reality. You're not just talking theoretically. This is stuff that you've done with and for yourself. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Amantha.